All right. Well, it's good to see everybody, even if we're not face to face. It's good to still see everybody's faces. I'm going to go jump right in and let Vaughn and Jason take over. And if you need to let me share, you need to share the screen, let me know.
Microphone's off.
Hey, Katie.
Hey.
Hi.
You're down there.
Hello, Katie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Vaughn, can you hear us? Yep, I can't hear you. Hang on.
Hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you. You want to share this? You want me to? You're welcome to share the screen if you'd like.
Okay. What do you want to do? Do you want to call in? No. Mouse pad? No.
And we've got a few people joining us here as we go.
Everybody's told me otherwise.
Vaughn, we're ready when you are.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if that's okay with you.
There you go. Perfect.
That's not it. No.
It's got the green line around it.
So what do you see, Matthew? See the PowerPoint?
Yep. Sorry, I can see your PowerPoint.
All right. There it goes.
There you go. That takes up the screen. That's perfect.
We're doing great. All right. Greetings, everyone. I think, Matthew, do we have everybody here with us today?
I think that's pretty much everybody. Sorry, I had to close the door. I think that's pretty much everybody. I can do a head count here in just a second.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. This is our third meeting of the Envision Jamestown Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. And we have a bit of a full agenda this afternoon. Our main goal is really to get through the survey results. And if we need to, we don't want to take up too much of your time today. So if it looks like we're going to go over getting to some of the other background research, we might have a subsequent meeting to do that. We'll just see how time is as we get through that. So we'll be doing those two items, the survey results, the background research, talk some more about community engagement and our future steering committee meetings and before we adjourn this afternoon. So to reintroduce the survey to you, remember we started it, went live back on April 15th. We closed it a week ago, basically on June 15th. We got a total of 580 responses. The survey was available online on our website. The town did some Facebook advertising for it. The town did a mailing to, what is it, every residential address in town. Matthew, is that correct?
That's correct. We did a mailing, postcard mailing to everybody that has a water and sewer account. So those are our in-town mailing addresses. Yes.
And overall, I think it was a very successful exercise to get some feedback from the community as we're beginning the process. Overall, there are 425 of those 580 residents or 580 respondents were residents of the town. We had questions on there to help us discern who was and was not a resident. So about close to 75% or 3/4 of the people that took the survey were actually residents in town in Jamestown. A variety of, on this particular question, you could check multiple boxes. So not everybody checked everything that was applicable to them. And some people, of course, checked multiple boxes if they were residents, they worked here and owned property, they might, and owned a business, they might check all 4 of those. The other category was a wide variety of things, ranging from people being in-town residents, ETJ residents, or just giving us other information about themselves. People that did not reside in town, most of those were ETJ residents, some from High Point, some from Greensboro. These are mostly people that either worked or owned property here, had some other interest in the survey. Fairly decent distribution of the longevity of those residents who did respond. About 1/5 each in those groups of, living here between 10 and 20, 20 and 30, and over 30 years. We also had a good turnout. Almost 20% of the respondents had lived in town for less than 5 years, and almost 15% between 5 and 10 years. So it was really a cross section of folks in the community. The age of the respondents, pretty even between the age groups of 51 to 65 and over 65. We had a few people under the age of 18 take it, several in the 18 to 24 range. But of course, most of the folks that took the survey, as this data shows, were over the age of 35. Residents who took the survey, we asked them a question about where they worked. Fair amount, a plurality really worked in Greensboro, Jamestown and High Point following that. And the rest distributed pretty much throughout the area of the Piedmont and the Triangle. The first kind of question that we asked, to get real feedback from people was to give us 3 words that describe Jamestown. And really the #1 response in there was Jamestown is a friendly community. Also a small town, quaint, quiet, safe, very, very, very good attributes to have when people are coming with the first things that come to mind when they're thinking about you. So that kind of fed into a lot of the answers that we got. It was kind of repeated throughout the survey. We asked about what people really associated, what physical elements of the community they associated with Jamestown. The library being one of the first things that really see when you're coming in from High Point, maybe, is that it's really recognizable as being Jamestown. Scored the highest there. Pretty good distribution of town hall, downtown, Main Street, the town parks, and some of the other historic sites. The brick sidewalks was interesting. People really associate those brick sidewalks with being in Jamestown. So these are things that people kind of identify as the Jamestown aesthetic or the brand. Interesting question here. Asked a question about how would people describe their quality of life living in Jamestown, and almost 91% said that they had a high quality of life. Only 9% said they had average. Absolutely nobody said they had a low quality of life. We thought that was very interesting and very good. When 90% of the people think that they're basically living in paradise. Top reasons to live in Jamestown came back as being a small town option and in between a couple of big urban areas, essentially located nestled in between Greensboro and High Point. That location, being able to access other amenities, employment, other things in the triad, that location was #2. And then the historic character and appearance, #3 there. All very strong. Most people picked those in the survey. When asked about what they thought about the pace of development in Jamestown over the last few years, maybe the last 10 years or so, a little more than 60% thought it was just right. About a third thought it was a little too fast. Not many thought it was too slow, though. So people, in general, again, a majority kind of have felt the pace of growth in recent times has been about just right. We asked what the primary challenges that the community was facing was, and we had a really wide range of answers, and people could write a few words, a few sentences, or we got answers that were a couple paragraphs in some of these open-ended questions like this. And what Bridget spent a lot of time doing is going back through these, identifying keywords and themes and grouping the answers together. And that's how we came up with the responses by category. Really growth and development. Most people thought that the pending growth or growth that might come could have an effect on Jamestown. Maintaining that small town feel, which I think kind of goes along with growth and development. Parking downtown, having the right kind of housing, getting traffic right on Main Street, schools, making sure that there are adequate school resources for residents. Protecting small businesses, and the development of Johnston Farm kind of round out those that came in with over 50 mentions in this particular section. We asked a question about mostly for residents, but maybe business owners as well. What type of services could the community provide that weren't currently being provided? Not everybody answered with a direct kind of town service that might be provided, but it's interesting to see what people want nonetheless, as evidenced by that more restaurants response. That was a pretty common one there. Most people said, or the largest number of responses was that no additional services were needed. But the first thing that really came up is garbage cans for trash pickup, which if, from our listening sessions and just our knowledge of the community, that didn't surprise us very much. People want to have more events, more sidewalks, better crosswalks, more parking downtown, keeping businesses in town, having a dog park, a lot of park oriented items there, parks for kids, bigger parks, and then bike lanes and trails and better police were kind of some of the top answers we got to this question. We asked a question about how GTCC, noting that it's location proximate to Jamestown, and thinking about ways that that Jamestown as a community could better integrate itself with GTCC, take more advantage of the services and amenities that it offers, and be a better partner and reciprocal in return from GTCC. Things that were mentioned, promoting GTCC, adult education, events on campus, other things, ways for the community really to partner with the community college, since it's such a big employer and brings so many people to the area every day during the week. It was just interesting hearing people's thoughts on how GTCC could play a bigger role in Jamestown, and Jamestown could play a bigger role in the life of the campus. Excuse me. We asked a question, basically, why do you visit downtown? When you do go downtown, the overwhelming response there was to go out to eat. Very popular restaurants. You can kind of see where those other responses go on that spectrum there. But really, that entertainment factor, if you add in restaurants, entertainment, and nightlife together, that really pushes you over. 300 responses came back in that vein. So when people do go downtown and they drive, we asked what their perception was of the parking situation currently. And most people, or a plurality of people, said that they would park nearby and walk instead of essentially trying to find a space to park downtown. That's about a third of people said it's often hard to find a space, hence parking nearby and walking. And about a fifth of folks thought that really parking was plentiful all the time. So we asked how people got downtown. About 3/4. This is for if you take a trip downtown, how do you usually get there? About 3/4 drove, but a fair number of walkers. Over 15% of people said that they would regularly walk downtown when they're going to do one of those activities. Very small numbers of bikers, very small numbers of carpoolers and Uber and Lyft and taxi providers as well. So driving and walking primary means of transportation downtown. We asked what features or other enhancements could be made to improve downtown Jamestown. Number one, adding parking, more businesses, enhancing building facades, having more restaurants, more shops, better landscaping along the streets, expanding the sidewalk system, I guess, meaning making it easier for people to get from their neighborhoods to downtown, maybe having enhanced crosswalks. People noted the old dry cleaner building and occupying or tearing down vacant buildings in the same breath, essentially there. Combined, that would be a pretty significant response in and of itself. Really got a lot of good suggestions from folks, but of course, parking being one of the most visible and one of the most affected items to most people came up number one in that question. Traffic, we asked people's perception of the current situation of traffic. Most people said they didn't really have a lot of problems getting around town, but people did realize that with growth could come the possibility for additional traffic, and there's some improvements that might need to be made. Very few people said that they frequently experienced any kind of delays when driving around town. We asked people to kind of rank their perception of various aspects of the local transportation system. So this would be basically the roads and sidewalks that serve the community. Let's see, some of the most important things we took away from here were that, in general, people found most of the infrastructure to be pretty good. There was a little bit more thoughts about pedestrian and bicycle safety and infrastructure being poor or below average, which of course is a concern. In general, the roads, traffic congestion, and traffic safety were fairly fine. People thought they were good to adequate. The majority of folks that answered the survey felt that. But when it gets down to the pedestrian and bicycle safety, there was more evidence of some thoughts about there being some additional improvements needed to that aspect of the system. So we then asked, specifically, if you would like to see improvements made, what would they be? Top two there, of course, bike lanes and sidewalks. I think that number of people who regularly walk in the community or ride a bike, people have a desire to do it, obviously, but sometimes might feel that they don't have the right infrastructure to be able to do it, being able to get through their neighborhood out to a main road or on the main road that they're on, being able to get into town. So that's heartening to those folks that want to have a better bike and pedestrian network. There's certainly support in the community for doing that. Parking access, number three there, enforcing speed limits, traffic calming, et cetera. This is probably mostly focused on Main Street, and we've noted those issues there, and we've talked to the Sheriff's Department about that as well. Pedestrian crossings, multi-use paths. So if you lump most of those together, those answers really, come back to, infrastructure for people to be able to walk and bike around town. But we did have a pretty wide range of responses there as well. So we asked the normal mode of transportation. This isn't downtown specific, but asking people how they made short trips, whether that be to recreate or go to the post office or go to the store to get something. And interesting, out of the total number of responses, over 100, almost 150 people said that their preferred mode of transportation for short trips in town was walking. That's really great. Very few bikers in there. Again, I think there's a perception, at least it's probably reality, that biking on some of the roads around town can be a little bit dangerous right now. So we asked about dangerous areas. Please note essentially the areas where you see issues with safety for bikers and pedestrians. Main Street, number one, followed by Guilford Road. Generally, pedestrian crossings in general, East Fork Road, the Black Powder, the crossing there has been noted, of course, post office. But this gave us a lot of good feedback, and we do have information from DOT about location of pedestrian and bicycle crashes as well that we can kind of merge with this to see if there's any gaps in between people's perception and what the data shows. So these come back up. You can see Main Street kind of sticking out there in those dangerous areas. We asked people their perception of the bypass, which will be completed hopefully soon. Most people either thought it would have a positive or a neutral impact. From some of our small group discussions that we had, some of our listening sessions, that's kind of the takeaway that we had as well. I think people were don't really know for sure what's going to happen, but generally thought that either things wouldn't change much in town, or that there would be some improvement to traffic, particularly on Main Street, with cars being able to, through traffic, not having to go through the middle of town anymore. We asked about cultural, art, historic, and architectural resources, particularly ones that we thought might be in danger of being lost. Jamestown Library, the old school, the Mendenhall House came up. Those were top two. It's about cultural resources as well. So things like the sidewalks came back up in that. Johnson Farm, the Ragsdale Farm, all got mentions in there. The Oakdale Mill, City Lake Park got a lot of mentions, even though it's not in Jamestown. It's in High Point, of course. Interesting responses there. So the vast overwhelming majority of folks in town either agree or strongly agree that it's important to protect those cultural and historic resources in the community. Very good to see. Only a very small 1.2% disagreed with that, and only 0.2%, that's maybe one or two people out there, strongly disagreed with it. So again, these showing up, that Jamestown Library really sticks out. Mendenhall, historic sites in general, Town Hall, City Lake Park. So in danger, Oakdale Cotton Mill comes up number one. People are apprehensive about the future that hold what the future might hold for it. Johnson Farm, farmland in general, the Armstrong House, Potter House. People have a lot of strong feelings about these important resources and features in their community and want to see them preserved. We asked people what some of the important natural and environmental resources. This isn't just about physical built places, but also our open spaces and our recreational amenities as well. So greenways and parks, the Johnson Farm, City Lake Park, of course, Jamestown Park, just green space in general. We noted in the survey, kind of a setup to this question, that the Deep River runs through Jamestown, but the town's back has been turned to it a little bit over the years. It's not really a featured central part of the community right now. So we asked people what the most appropriate things the town might be able to do to better feature this wonderful asset as part of the community might be, and got a whole lot of responses about adding walking trails. We know that there was a plan that was done previously about the prospect of being able to do something there. It never got implemented, but we think that shows there's still a strong desire for that. We hope that there would be an opportunity to do that if we identify that as a priority in the plan. Having parks and other recreational areas along the river, having places for people to access it, to do water related activities, rafting, kayaking, fishing. People noting that it would be good to have the banks cleaned up and fortified. Promoting its presence in the community more, getting Oakdale Cotton Mill kind of ties into some other things, revitalized, and so that would be a way for people to access the river. They're right there on it. So a lot of good thoughts from the community, and we'll be exploring some of these more as we go through the process. Let's ask a question about the amount of basic parks and open space that were present in the community. Close to 50% said it was not enough. A little bit less than that said it was just right. So we hear it loud and clear about the desire for more open space and recreational areas in the community. So we asked people also to give us. I've gone through a lot of these questions now. I've been thinking about what's going on in Jamestown, and hopefully forming some ideas in their head about what that, how these things work together. And we asked people to basically write a vision statement. 10 to 20 years from now, what do you see as Jamestown's future? What's your preferred vision for the community? And number one, maintaining that small town feel. limiting growth. Number two there, having more small businesses and restaurants, more parks and open space, more places for people to walk and bike, beautifying the community, cleaning up buildings and grounds. A lot of, all things really that are kind of focused back on that desire to maintain a small town feel. And that was kind of one of the underlying themes really of a lot of the answers that we got were things that focused on Jamestown being an authentic place, a small town with character that preserved its history, had growth that was adequately regulated and not out of scale for the community. And so, people's answers to this question kind of reinforced everything that we'd heard throughout the survey. So with that, Matthew, I think might be a good time to maybe go ahead and take some questions.
Okay, everybody's actually unmuted. If there are questions, jump in and let Vaughn know what you got.
And just one other point to note, and I shared this with the town council the other night when it came to the meeting, is that a very large number of the people that responded to the survey spent 25, 30 minutes working on it. And so that tells you the volume of feedback that we got. And this is kind of boiling it down to its most simple form, essentially. But people were very thoughtful in their responses, and we got a lot of good information and had a lot of feedback. And we appreciate everybody that did take the time to fill out the survey and spent so much time on it.
I have a question. This is Jane. Do we know how many people did not answer all the questions?
I think we can probably find that out. We had a large number of responses to most of the questions. I think Bridget might be able to look that up while we're here. So we can get back on that. But excuse me. So for instance, when we asked people to give us their 3 words they felt or phrases that felt they described Jamestown, just about everybody answered that with at least one. A smaller number, but close to the same number, did 2, and a smaller number did 3. And people that don't live in town tended maybe not to answer questions about town services, the quality of life, or things like that. But the majority of people answered the majority of questions. Most of the questions were answered by most of the people.
And in line with that, my other question is, did everybody state where they lived?
The overwhelming majority did. We asked for the road name in the survey. So please tell us if you checked that you lived in Jamestown, we asked for the road name. And so we got that from people. Do you happen to recall off the top of your head, Bridget, what that?
I believe there is something.
Okay. Yeah, so what Bridget was just saying that there are about 80 people in total that did not give us enough information on that particular question, but we were able to take other aspects of their responses to other questions and be able to determine whether or not they were in town.
Okay.
Hey, this is Mac Armin. I thought it was interesting. I live on Guilford Road, and I know well about, I guess it's really not even traffic issues, in my opinion. It's just people using that as a raceway and just whenever they want. But I was surprised at how many other people that obviously everyone doesn't live on that road brought that up. Is that something, this is probably more of a question for Matt or town council, that has came up before? And, has this even really been considered? Because, I live on that road. I don't really know what much more you can do about it.
I think Matthew might be busy.
The Department of Transportation controls the speed limit, so we don't have much of a say-so in that. And I think a lot of that's going to be alleviated when it's no longer a cut-through with the bypass.
Yeah, I hope so. I'll tell you, from living on that road, I live at the corner by the firehouse. There's probably people that take that corner to like 55, 70 sometimes and just pin it down the road. So I don't even know if it's a speed limit issue as more people love that road. I don't know why.
It's unfortunate too, because roads like Forestdale, Ragsdale, Potter Drive, they're all cut throughs also for those individuals that don't live here, and they do fly through.
They also go around you if you're going the speed limit, they'll go around you in a heartbeat in the middle lane.
Center lane, yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything in the survey results that anybody found surprising or different than your perception of how people might have answered those questions?
Boom.
I don't.
Yes, Kenny.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sort of curious about the impact on the bypass.
Mm-hmm.
The public's perception seemed to be a little bit high. Do you think that's a normal response from the public? Have you seen bypasses really negatively impact the community?
We have certainly seen bypasses negatively impact communities when in a growing community, when the bypass essentially becomes the new de facto commercial area for a town that once had a pretty strong core, leaving behind lots of vacant storefronts and shopping centers in the center of town. I think Jamestown is a little bit different in that the development types out on the bypass probably will not be competitive with what is on Main Street. Is my perception of that. And I think from when we had our listening sessions, and so it reinforced kind of what we heard in our listening sessions. It was either people were either unsure or felt that it might have a generally positive impact by taking through traffic from High Point to Greensboro and back and forth off of Main Street, and maybe allow there to be some improvements made to Main Street since it wouldn't have to carry as much traffic, and generally having fewer cars to deal with for pedestrians and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a surprising question to me about the fact that we need more park and recreation when it doesn't appear as though the park and recreation we have is used. I'm not sure where that came from.
Yeah, so my thought on that would be that if you kind of look at the distribution, where essentially people live and where your major park amenities are, there's a little bit of a geographic disconnect there, and people tend to judge the availability of parks and recreational spaces by what is really immediately around them. Now, distances are relative in a town like Jamestown. It's not that far from most people's homes to the park. And it's certainly maybe more accessible now with the pedestrian bridge on East Fork Road for people that don't want to drive there. But there's still kind of a perception probably that it's separated from them. And people not wanting to maybe have to load up the kids to drive to a park, but would maybe rather be able to walk to a park easily. And so that's kind of where I would perceive that come from. I think the question was talking about open space as well. And I think there is some concern about, future development and how much green space existing green space that might take up. So that probably played a little bit into it as well.
Is there not a way we can narrow that down more to find out? Is it more about the green space? I think the park and recreation and the golf course and what we have to offer as a community, as small as we are, we offer a lot.
Yeah, it's great.
So if we can figure out, okay, if it's more about the green space, then okay, what can we do to focus on that versus focus on our time, efforts, and money on park and recreation?
Yeah, we'll see what we can do about fleshing out some additional information about that as we go through the process.
And just as a note, we just finished a comprehensive plan update for Parks and Recreation, and I have that information out. I can get that out to you, or I believe it's on our website. under news and notices, Rich.
It is. I've seen it. And it just kind of confused me with, like I said, there was concern over park and recreation. I think that's something we could always focus on, but we do very well as a community, I think. But my opinion.
I think the amount of recreational activity you offer is certainly commensurate with the size of the town. I think that when people respond to that, if it is about parks, it's probably about the park being immediately next to me or not being next to me.
Fair enough. Are we surprised that we didn't get more residents local to fill out the survey? Or is that about normal?
It's a fairly large share of the population. I had been calculating, using the sample size calculators, and the survey is at least is statistically significant with regard to the answers of in-town residents. At a 95% confidence level, about 5.5% margin of error. So the answers are good. I think it's fairly significant for a town this size. People are engaged in Jamestown more than a lot of other communities.
I think it was a fine job of letting everybody know with the banner uptown and the mailers and reaching out.
I think we were, competing at times with some other news that was going on, and so people's focus wasn't 100% in things, and so we left it open basically for an extra month than we'd originally planned. And the mailing the town did, ensured that every residential address that had water and sewer service was able to be notified of it directly. And so that there were some spurts there through the process immediately when we opened up, and then a few more kind of jumps in participation as we went through. And the number of in-town residents, we kind of tracked it each day as the responses came in, kept on growing, especially more in proportion to the people that didn't live in town. That folks that didn't live in town kind of leveled off after a while and dissipated.
Vaughn, this is Martha. I'm actually, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm actually in the council chambers on, I guess, Cody and Kenny's. Okay. But I was just curious, we had a question about the impact of the bypass, what residents thought. Right. But we did, and we had a few questions about the perception of development, but we had discussions what type of development we might like to see around the bypass. So is there any information you're going to be able to glean from this survey on that, or is that something that the committee?
Our intent is to work with the committee as well as the community as we go through the process on developing a future land use map that will include, of course, the bypass. I think if we need to focus on that as one specific topic, then we can do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Martha Wolf again. One more time. I did send an email that I had received from a Miss Young to Jason. I just want to be sure that y'all had received that. I don't know if you have a response to that yet. I did let her know if I heard anything from y'all, I would certainly pass it along to her.
Yeah, we've received it. We're trying to take the email was with regard to potential future employment levels, a higher rate of unemployment becoming more normal, at least for some period of time. And we're working on a number of comprehensive plans right now. So we're thinking about those issues, being optimists. Hopefully, we will get back to a normal that we had been enjoying in terms of employment levels in the relatively near future. That's probably not going to be tomorrow, but I think we need to try and anticipate realistic conditions in the future, and we will take such things into account as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi. I was looking over my notes. Several things have been mentioned already, but I was really surprised and pleased about the comments about promoting GTCC. I think a lot of us, I just drive by and kind of take it for granted.
Right.
But just opening up those thoughts of, gee, this is great. It's right here. We need to figure out a way to have them more involved or have us connected with them and communicate with them somehow to know what's going on and have events together. So I think that's a great asset.
Yeah, it's kind of a behemoth there. It brings so many people to the immediate area 5 days, hopefully sometime soon again, 5 days a week and on the weekends even, and at night. And there's often kind of a town gown kind of dichotomy relationship that's not always 100% there. They kind of might want to stick to themselves, and town kind of might want to stick to itself, but it's a great resource and has a lot to offer. And so, taking advantage of these assets you have already in your community, and looking for ways to identify how to better take advantage of this. It's a public asset. It's a community college funded by the residents of the county, essentially. And so, if there's ways to take better advantage of that, we want to, help have that included in the plan.
I think that would be terrific, because I could see an exchange of cultural events, sharing of things, sharing of resources. I think it's a great idea.
A lot of other people did as well, so that was good. We were happy. Do we have any other questions or comments before we move on?
I appreciated the comments about the beautification and landscaping on page 16 and walking trails, River Walk, promoting River Walk. I don't know where the money would come from, but that, that's number one, the dollar sign.
Yeah.
But I could just envision that too, talking about envision, is having that as a real beautiful place and a great resource for not only the residents, but for guests, tourists maybe.
Oh, yeah. That would probably bring a lot of people.
I think so. So I was real pleased to see this. This whole survey has helped me see Jamestown in different ways, different opportunities. It's great.
Anything else before we move on? All right, but I just want to say thanks again to anybody that's watching that took the survey. And thanks for everybody that spent so much time on it. We really appreciate all the answers we got. And this is really going to help us go through the process and be well informed about what the community is thinking about the future. All right, so let's jump back into the presentation. We might take a few more breaks as we go through this, because the topics will be a little bit more different through this. So this is our background research. We've been working on this since we started the project, basically collecting information about Jamestown. This is data, mapping information, statistical information related to the community, and we're compiling it and mapping it, and wanted to go ahead and present this to you, some of the highlights of that background research. And really, besides just taking a look and seeing what we found, at the end, if anybody notices anything glaringly obvious that's missing from this, and things you think might be important for us to research or know or understand as we're developing the plan, please let us know. But we'll kind of go through this in sections and have a minute or two of questions and answers after each section. So just to reorient everyone with the study area, that's Jamestown in the dark blue there. The light gray is or the kind of darker gray is the Jamestown ETJ. And you can see High Point and Greensboro adjacent in the lighter gray. So the study area basically encompasses the town and its ETJ. And so that is unless we're talking about the, in-town statistics, which we will be for a lot of the issues like demographics, other things that we're mapping are going out to the extent of the ETJ. So starting with demographics, looking at the historic population growth. So going back just 50 years ago, Jamestown was much smaller than it is today, less than 1,500 people. The latest number, the estimate from the American Community Survey as part of the U.S. Census Bureau, just over 4,000, the 2018 number. I think the 2019 number might be coming fairly soon, maybe this summer. They're still compiling that data as far as I know. Jamestown is located in a county which the North Carolina Office of Budget Management, the State Demographer's Office, anticipates seeing some fairly rapid continued growth over the next couple of decades. So Guilford County is right around 550,000 right now, and 20 years from now, looking at adding about 100,000 people. And so Jamestown is kind of sitting at the middle of what else, in between Greensboro and High Point, sitting at the middle of what's going to be a very fast growing county. When you look at the rates of growth on this slide, you see that Jamestown has, back between 2000 and 2010, the rate of growth was observed was just under 10%, where things around it, communities around it were growing at a much faster rate. But between 2010 and 2018, the estimate of population growth, of course, this is just an estimate, and a reminder for everyone to make sure you fill out your census forms either online or stick it in the mail, so we have a good accurate count when that number comes back. But Jamestown has experienced a little bit more growth since 2010. Looking at the distribution of the age range of the population in Jamestown, we see that there's a big bulge kind of in the middle there, that 45 to 54 year age group. And that likely corresponds to when a major development took place where turnover was happening in a large subdivision where a lot of people of relatively the same age came in to buy houses, had children, and have stayed in the community. All other aspects of the population pyramid are fairly typical, but that big bulge in the middle is kind of interesting to us. It probably does correspond directly about 20 years prior to a fairly big development event. So we also have a table, and this will be all in a report, kind of like the report we did for the survey. We're kind of finalizing, putting some finishing touches on that, but you can see the absolute numbers of the distribution of the age ranges in Guilford County. You can see that compared to Guilford County and the state of North Carolina, both about 26% of the population, that 45 to 64 year age group. In Jamestown, it's almost right over a third of the population in that age group there. So you're kind of skewing a little bit older there, as well as in the 65 age group as well. But children under the age of 5 is, that the population distribution suffers for that essentially. You don't have as many young children in the community. And this is just a pie chart showing the distribution of the age groups as well to better visualize how that those two, basically ages 45 and up are greater than 50% of the community as a whole. The median age, so this is the person right in the middle, essentially in Jamestown. Median age skews fairly high for the region and for the state, almost 47 years of age. Archdale and Clemens have similar and aging populations as well, but Jamestown is, the median age in the community is actually fairly high, which presents some challenges as well as opportunities going forward when you look at things like housing market and making sure there's enough turnover and supply to bring new people into the community. Looking at households, so a little over a quarter of Jamestown's population lives alone, about a quarter are families with children, and about 8% of seniors, people over the age of 65, live alone as well. Any questions about that brief introduction to demographics in Jamestown before we move on to educational attainment?
Just a short comment. In Cedarwood, since 2018, we've had about 41 changes.
Wow.
And yes, new. They just change out. They'll change out the same day. Just about. We can hardly see the sign.
Right.
Doesn't even hit the soil. And the majority of them have young children, or they were pregnant and going to have young children.
Great. And
it's a bit amazing to see them, all the strollers going by.
Yeah, so in 2021, when the new full count census data comes out, that would probably be, you'll start to see that. If that's a trend that's happening elsewhere in Jamestown, you'll start to see that that coming out in the data as well. This data is a little bit old. It's sample data as well, and so it's not 100%. It's not 100% accurate. It corresponds to the sampling techniques that they use, but it's, any kind of unique changes like that, where you have a big turnover in population in a particular neighborhood in a relatively short period of time, the census isn't really good at capturing that immediately after it happens. But that's good news though, because having increasing that number of kids under the age of 5 will be important for the community in a lot of ways. Any other comments or questions about the demographic information, population? All right, moving on to educational attainment. So Jamestown is a fairly well-educated community. A little bit over half of the folks in town have at least an associate's degree. If you had folks that have attended college for at least some period of time, you're looking at an overwhelming about 3/4 of the population there. Very few residents of Jamestown either have a no diploma or less than a 9th grade education, which is great. People with only a high school diploma, less than 1/4. So a relatively well-educated community. So you can look at those statistics in a little bit more detail here. I don't know if they're, put a red line on there to highlight Jamestown a little bit more. But when you look at things like the share of residents, this is people over the age of 25 to account for time to complete college essentially. But almost 20% of residents of Jamestown have a graduate or professional degree, which is excellent in terms of that does a lot for things like per capita income and median household income and housing prices. Essentially, definitely higher than your neighbors, definitely higher than the county, and higher than the state as a whole. Same with the bachelor's degree, number of residents with a bachelor's degree. Associate's degree percentage just right in line as is the some college, but really you're outperforming yourselves essentially on having a very, very small share of the population that doesn't have a high school diploma at this time. And so that really speaks volumes to the strength of your community from an educational background. And here you just see a graphic of that showing the relative how Jamestown kind of stacks up with a bachelor's degree or higher, the share of the population in that category compared to the state and the county and your neighbors in the cities of High Point and Greensboro. Any questions about educational attainment? Okay. Moving on to employment. So labor force participation rates, excuse me, Jamestown is very similar to Guilford County. Guilford County is very similar to the state. Labor force participation rates have been declining in recent decades, really seeing a small share of people that are in that population group that would be eligible or expected to work has been steadily declining over the years. But Jamestown is not really very different than what we see at the county or the state level. These are, of course, historical unemployment rate comparisons. But one thing to note, and I think you kind of make some assumptions about Jamestown maybe with this. It's kind of things a little bit backwards, but so Jamestown coming out of the financial crisis had a fairly low unemployment rate at that time already. Whereas we saw Guilford County, the state, and the United States as a whole, and still feeling the effects pretty hard from the tailwinds of that recession. And through this decade, the rate had remained fairly low, but of some concern as unemployment rates at geographies larger than Jamestown was decreasing, Jamestown started to increase. And I think we need to probably take a look at that a little bit to see if there's anything that really explains well where that came from. Looking at information from the past few months will probably skew things in the wrong direction, but we'll be investigating this particular aspect of our background research a little bit more as we move forward to see if there's anything that was peculiar happening in Jamestown that might have contributed to that.
Vaughn, do you think that it would be attributable to retirement in any form or fashion?
Well, when people retire, they aren't typically counted as unemployed. They can be if they retire from a job, but want to continue working, but cannot find work. That may explain some of it. I would imagine that most of the folks in a fairly large share of residents of Jamestown who retire but want to continue working could have either made the decision to not retire or might be a little bit easier for them to find a place to work. But given the age of residents and what we know about employment practices in a lot of places, that might explain some of it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Household income. Jamestown is in a very good position. This is the median household. So this is right in the middle. The household that's taking home the median amount of income each year is about $10,000 higher than Guilford County as a whole, about $8,000 higher than the state as a whole, which may not seem like a lot of money, but when you consider that's the middle, it does significantly increase the amount of disposable income in the community. So looking at a wide range of income factors here, one of the things to note, and this might kind of touch back on what Matthew just mentioned, is between 2010 and 2018, there was an assumed about $17,000 drop in annual median household income, about almost 30%. When people do retire, they still have income from a variety of sources, but it tends to decline very steeply. And so we noticed, going back to the demographic profile in terms of age distribution of the population, there's a lot of residents are either close to or have entered retirement already. And so we think that has a lot to do with it. Per capita income, which is maybe a little bit better gauge, did not decline very much, but we saw this, this kind of goes back to the unemployment rate, a small decline there when basically everybody else was increasing, a fairly large decline in median household income when everybody else was essentially increasing as well. High point, a very small increase over that period, but don't know exactly what happened. Retirement can explain a lot of that away. I think it probably does to a good extent, but we will make sure to keep on checking to see if anything unusual stands out in there and see if there's any kind of larger trend that might be of concern. Just of note, 80% of Jamestown residents work in Guilford County. Less than 20% work outside of the county. So this is the sector that people work in. It's not necessarily their job. The biggest ones are retail, trade, education, and healthcare. Other notable over 10%. So we have finance and real estate, entertainment, hospitality services, and manufacturing. So these are the types of industries that people have employment in, not necessarily the job that they do. They might be an accountant for a restaurant or manage a large department store. This is looking at Guilford County as a whole, but this is what they call the location quotient. So a location quotient of 1 would mean that you would have employment in a particular sector that is basically the norm throughout the United States. Where you're above 1, it means you have a surplus of jobs in a particular sector. Not that there's too many jobs, but you just are more specialized in that. And you have a location quotient less than 1, it means you have fewer jobs and are less specialized in a particular sector. And so of note there, Guilford County as a whole, just kind of providing some macro, larger scale economic indicators for the county. transportation and warehousing, pretty big deal in Guilford County, as our manufacturing, wholesaling, being kind of the Guilford having that legacy of being an industrialized county. Other sectors that are maybe more applicable to Jamestown, the administrative sector, the management and companies and enterprises, finance and insurance, and real estate and rental and leasing, all coming in a little bit more than specialized. Of course, the county, things like extractive industries, agriculture, mining, very low in the county. But otherwise, everything's fairly in line with what you see nationally. So then you look at, there's a wage location quotient as well. So this basically shows how much more people are being paid in a particular sector than they would in the normative county in the United States. And so we see that even manufacturing and wholesaling have higher wages here than you would expect to find other places, as well as transportation and warehousing. So these are essentially the industries that have been accounting for larger shares of the economy in Guilford County as a proportion to others in recent years, and kind of provide some insight on where the county as a whole is on that. When people do go to work, most of them drive alone, very small number carpool, small number work from home. Basically nobody uses public transportation in Jamestown. And the mean travel time to work, being centrally located, has its benefits. A little bit less than a 20-minute commute. That'll get you to downtown Greensboro, get you to the hospital in High Point. Probably get you fairly close to Winston-Salem if you tried real hard. But we have a little bit shorter commute in Jamestown than other places. And you have a lot of options about where to go. Any questions about employment before we move on? All right. So about some of the data we've gathered about housing in Jamestown. So Jamestown median home values, this is the house again in the middle of the pack, a little over $220,000. In terms of immediately neighboring communities, that's a lot higher than High Point and Greensboro and Guilford County as a whole. We looked at some regional peer communities. Only Elon was really anywhere higher. But housing in Jamestown has a lot of intrinsic value, and prices are fairly high compared to other communities. We look at the distribution of the age of the housing stock in Jamestown. Big peak, 70s and 80s up through 2000, and then a very steady and then accelerating decline to the current time, when very few new homes have been built inside the town limits. So you have a big bubble of homes being built beginning in the 50s and lasting up through 2000 or so. But your housing stock, you can pretty much peg a house in Jamestown to being between about 40 to 60 years of age, give or take. If you tried to guess the age of a house, you'd be right most of the time in there. The distribution of the types of housing is very general, but about 3/4 single family homes, about 1/4 multifamily homes, translates to about a little over almost 450 multifamily units. So occupancy rates by the owners, Jamestown, about close to 3/4 of Jamestown residents own their homes. That well outpaces your neighbors in Guilford County and is certainly higher than the state as a whole. That helps to make for a pretty strong community. People have a lot invested there. So occupancy rate. So of the occupied housing, of that housing stock, only less than 4% is not currently occupied. Which is a very strong showing. So it has to do with the age of your housing stock. It hasn't gotten to the age where it needs where you start to see housings being vacant because of neglected repair over too long of a period of time. Also, if you look at the values and the available incomes and the rates of owner occupancy in town, you're really seeing more incentive to invest in maintenance, making homes more desirable and giving them longer lives. And so compared to others around, which typically have vacancy rates over 10%, Jamestown's a very good position, showing a lot of, there's a lot of demand potential, when you get under 10% in vacancy. Any questions about housing before we move on? Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about, just kind of give you an idea of what we've been looking at, some of the data we've been collecting and developing ourselves. We've collected data on generalized land use patterns. Of course, you can see from this map that the majority of Jamestown is currently in use for residential purposes. Very little industrial land. Commercial is fairly concentrated along Main Street. And then some of your new developments going out there towards the Gate City Boulevard. Current town zoning, we got this data from the town, so we have it as well. You can see the distribution of zoning districts on this map. We'll be using this as these data points as we develop our future land use map. The town has some corridor overlay districts as part of its zoning, rural scenic overlay, a gateway scenic overlay, and it had a district for the bypass future right-of-way. Looked at historic assets and mapped all those around town. The map is pretty full for a community of its size. A lot of dots on there, so we've developed lists of all those, mapped the districts as well. So you have a Jamestown National Register district, as well as Oakdale Cotton Mill district, as well as a large number of other individual properties that have historic status. Questions on those? All right, so let's talk about transportation a little bit. So data we've been collecting, of course, railroad and crossings, sidewalks, roads, all the transportation assets in the community. So I have a good understanding of that. We've been collecting data on location of vehicle crashes in town. This is data from 2014 to 2018. That'll help inform us as we're looking at things like recommendations for intersection improvements. Pedestrian crashes in town. Map has a lot more dots on it, of course, than we'd like to see, and probably leads to people's perception of safety of being able to walk in Jamestown. So we collected this data from NCDOT. Of course, you have a big cluster there in your downtown area. Bicycle crashes also from DOT, looking, identify areas where there might be hazards, combining that with the pedestrian incident data. So these are projects on the State Transportation Improvement Plan. Of course, the bypass, sidewalk projects on Main Street, Oakdale Road, multi-use trail, nearby. Let's see, other road improvements on Main Street, and sidewalks on Penny Road as well. So just getting an understanding of the projects that are in the state's pipeline. Other planned improvements, yes, these are from the sidewalk or the other master plan. So proposed sidewalks and trails.
Are those proposed sidewalks on Guilford Road?
Hey, Dawn, it would be good, I think, us to go ahead and change some of these colors to the ones that have been completed. I know that, we're not quite open on the pedestrian bridge across City Lake on East Fork Road, but we're almost there.
Okay.
A couple of them, I can see that probably I can help you out on that one.
Okay, great. Yeah, so these were all from the 2010 pedestrian transportation.
Yep. It needs to help you update a few of those.
Yep. So are there any questions or comments about transportation besides that? Okay. So we've also been collecting information about utility infrastructure. So we've gotten data from the town. Sewer system, of course, makes development possible. Water system, just having a good understanding of its extent as well. Questions about the water sewer system? Anything missing? All right. So the next item, you might have seen this come through before, but we've done some research on livability factors, and we've been including this in recent plans, so I think it's interesting to look at. And so AARP has a program, Livable Communities initiative, where they've developed some metrics that they use to measure livability in these 7 areas: housing, neighborhoods, transportation, environment, health, engagement, and opportunity. And what we've done is taken that data and looked at local communities that are peers to Jamestown and neighbors, as well as regionally throughout the state, to identify, to basically show how Jamestown is doing on these elements, these livability factors compared to other communities, and results are pretty good. So looking at Jamestown, the highest scores that it had were environment, opportunity, and engagement, a little bit lower in transportation, housing, neighborhoods, and health. Peer communities, looking at on the right there, just kind of compare who got the highest score in the area to in each of those livability factors. So overall livability, if we look locally, Jamestown scored the highest compared to Greensboro, High Point, Guilford County, Clemens, and Elon. Looking at those other peer communities there. Housing, Jamestown. So the factors that go into housing scores, a lot of it has to do with affordability and diversity of housing stock. Jamestown is not necessarily the most affordable place to live. And the housing stock is more of a monoculture in terms of having a larger share of single family homes. And so that probably contributed to its lower score on that. They're not necessarily negative factors, but when you're looking from the livability scores are really looking at developing communities that are more inclusive. And so having a wider range of housing options generally improves the score in that factor. Neighborhoods, Jamestown, higher than most. High Point and Greensboro had a little bit higher scores. Some of the factors in there are access and proximity to things like parks, being able to get to immediate proximity to grocery stores, availability of other cultural amenities in close proximity to neighborhoods go a lot into that factor. So a lot of Jamestown is very proximate to things like being able to get to a grocery store pretty quickly and being able to get to a library pretty quickly. Things like parks may be a little bit different in terms of immediate accessibility, which probably brought that down. But you're not a whole lot different than some of your neighbors. Transportation perspective, most communities in this area don't score as well. Jamestown's kind of in the middle of the pack on that. A lot of that has to do with accessibility to things like public transportation. So not really having as much accessibility probably hurts that a little bit. On environment though, Jamestown scores very high. The amount of open space, water quality, air quality is a big factor in that. Not having an interstate highway running through the middle of Jamestown improves your air quality scores greatly. And so that probably contributes a lot, but of course that having green space and some other factors really make Jamestown stand out compared to its neighbors and really put it up at the top of the pack. Even if you would look nationally, that'd be a pretty high score. Health, North Carolina in general doesn't score well in the health factors due to some legacies of the way that we ate and have perpetuated some of the ways we ate. A lot of smoking. Those rates go into this. And so the data might not be as discrete to Jamestown, but some negative health outcomes pull us all down in North Carolina, and Jamestown gets pulled down with us. So engagement, this really measures the degree to this. So factors like voter registration and participation rates in recent elections, participation in civic activities, just being, having a community that's engaged with what's going on, having participation in school activities, all of that goes into the engagement factor. Jamestown up really high. There's a lot of competition for that, but Jamestown is a very engaged community, and it's reflected here in the data. And finally, opportunity. The score here weights a little bit towards just the resources that are present in Jamestown, having a little bit higher incomes and educational attainment give Jamestown a little bit of a leg up there. But a rising tide will theoretically lift all boats. And so people, just by the fact of being a resident of Jamestown, even if you don't have as many resources as your neighbor, it's generally understood that you will have opportunities for better outcomes than your neighbors in some of the other communities around. So, and that's the last of the livability factors. Any questions on those? This is just to kind of provide some benchmarking, so to speak, for how Jamestown stacks up, and we can organize recommendations around these factors to help identify areas of deficiency and see where there might be opportunities to improve neighborhoods or housing based on the way that the metrics are used to develop the scores.
So other than us, who uses that type of information, the opportunity, environment, transportation, et cetera?
Well, this is actually a national program, and ARP has been working with communities to develop what they call livable communities plans or livable communities action plans. And the theory being that a community that's built and provides opportunities for people of all ages and abilities is a livable community in general that supports not just older folks or kids, but is a really, can be a thriving place and a nurturing place for everyone. And so they've been running this program for several years now, and I think they've maybe come to Jamestown to make a presentation, but it's becoming more popular. The data is what the data is. They use data that's available nationally, but we can look and see at factors that might impact Jamestown scores and see if there's really mitigating factors in there. But it's becoming more popular, and we've been incorporating it into plans recently as well, because it helps really provide some perspective on how a particular community stacks up to its neighbors in the region and how it's doing in these different areas.
Yeah, I have a comment.
Sure.
On the health score that we had, I'm wondering how that's figured, because we have in Cedarwood, when it was built in the 60s, right, we have many people who stayed here. Mm-hmm. And then now you can figure the time frame, we have a turnover. That's where the younger people are coming in, but also you would have a lot of hospital visits by that older population until they move out. And I'm just wondering how that's figured.
Yeah. Okay. So Bridget was just saying that not having a hospital present in Jamestown is a major contributing factor to that.
Okay.
In other communities, data on obesity, rates of heart disease, smoking, things like that are major factors. Some of this is measured in terms of being able to immediately access healthcare resources. Not that Jamestown doesn't have a more mobile, a population that's mobile and has access through other means, but it's just not immediately proximate to the community. And we know there's doctor's offices there, but there's not a large healthcare facility right in town.
Oh, okay, thank you. I was wondering how that was figured.
So to look at all that data, it basically says that we're a healthy community.
Yeah, I think if you exclude that aspect of it, you would be in better shape. Any other questions or comments on the background research that we've done to date as a whole? Are there things, this isn't 100% of everything we've done, some of the more displayable in a presentation like this. And like I said, there will be an actual written report, kind of like the report we did for the survey, that will have all this information in it as well for you to be able to review. Any other questions, comments, observations, things that we might need to look at in addition to what we've been presenting today in the background research? Okay, great. So we're right on schedule then. So back to a topic we kind of discussed some at our last committee meeting, our community engagement. So the survey was, of course, one part of that. Having these meetings streamed for people to be able to watch is another aspect of that. Having our website, another. But we had originally planned, of course, to have 3 major workshops in May, June, and July or August on those topics you see there. We've been, dealing with current situation in terms of being able to have public gatherings for quite some time now. We're probably going to be in some version of this current situation for the foreseeable future, at least. And if you recall at the last meeting, we had talked about the potential to move the initial workshop. We were talking about moving it to June and doing it online only. We still have that option available. We've come up with something else as well that we think might work. So just kind of recap of what that would have looked like, having our community presentations that we are going to contact, have some folks picked out to do those, presenting the survey results and background research, having that pre-recorded for people to look at on the website, and then basically doing a registration for people to join us in small group discussions online. We had a lot of discussion about that alternative at the last meeting, and we've been doing having a lot of discussions here about how we might do this differently to address some of those concerns. We're probably still not going to be having any 100 people in a room sitting elbow to elbow, talking to each other for quite some time. And so we thought that another way to do that would be to incorporate some of the ways, some of what we had talked about with the online, us preparing some presentations on this information that we've been discussing with the steering committee, having those community presentations, but then having our team do a couple days of small group facilitation at town hall. The expectation people would review the background research, the survey results, basically watch those presentations, and then we would have some discussion questions and topics that people would be able to join from the community, join us to have some facilitated discussions on. We think we could probably, over a couple of days, do about 100 people with that, maintaining enough distance from each other to be responsible. And just wanted to kind of throw that out there as a second option, as a way to keep the process moving forward, and ensuring that we have as much engagement as we can based on the restrictions that we're dealing with and the realities of both the anything the governor might tell us to do, as well as people's potential apprehensiveness about gathering together in large groups, even if we were allowed to do so. So I just wanted to get some additional feedback from you and see if anybody, and we've had some time to think since the last meeting, see if anybody had any additional ideas or thoughts about how we might be able to accomplish that first meeting, which was really the envisioned Jamestown meeting, be able to engage with more directly with the community, present this information to them, and get some feedback on some big topics, and start working towards developing some community consensus about some of the big issues of the day in Jamestown.
Vaughn?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Martha. I just wondered, we can have outside gatherings of 25 people,
Sure.
Wondered if we could do a couple of outside presentations or gatherings at Jamestown Park, maybe at a social distance, but you could at least reach 25 people at a time. I don't know if that's for the kickoff or somehow to incorporate that.
Yeah, I think the only issues with that are we would have to have people RSVP for it, number one, because we wouldn't want 30 people to show up and then people not be able, have to turn somebody away. We would have to, scheduling and getting the weather and having to reschedule based on our schedules and the other schedules that we're working with could be difficult. Whether doing it outside would be feasible, we would probably need to do it at night to be able to, if we're going to give it an actual presentation with a screen, which presents some other challenges because until about September, it's going to be, light enough, late enough that wouldn't have a lot of opportunity to do that. Maybe we get one a day in there. And there's the limited number of people that can do it. I think from an efficiency standpoint, if people are viewing a presentation, then being able to do that at their leisure, with the expectation if they wanted to participate in one of our small group meetings, they could then do that, have that kind of facilitated engagement that we were planning on having, but just everybody in the same room doing it. We would just be doing it in a lot of rooms over a couple of day period. And so that was our thought on that. If the direction from the town is to have meetings outside, we'll go with the decision to the extent that we can that the town wants us to do. I don't know. Our goal is to have this be meaningful for people, and 25 people under a picnic shelter having to be that far apart from each other and the kinds of discussions that we really want the community to engage in with their neighbors, I'm not sure how feasible that's going to be. So we want it to be a meaningful experience if we're going to drag.
I think we need to look at what you presented here. We need to think about it as a committee. Think about how that's going to work.
Sure. And we would like some, this is your community. And so we've put a couple options together that we think are ways that we could reasonably move forward with some aspects of the process as we kind of try and catch back up to our schedule as best we can without disrupting things or creating situations where people would not want to, for various reasons, might not want to be engaged. And so ideas from the committee are certainly welcome, and we that's what you're here for, to help give us guidance as we move through the process. So
do we have an idea of how many people see this live on YouTube?
I think Matthew will be able to get a number.
Currently right now it says we have 4 that are watching live. Certainly there are a number of people that view this sort of after the fact. We can take a look at that. It goes up with time.
Yeah.
What do you mean after the fact, bud?
So it'll stay out on YouTube. We're streaming it live right now, but people will have the opportunity, like later this evening, if they wanted to go back and watch it, they can watch it, on their own time. So you'll see that number creep up over time.
Well, Vaughn, of course, it's Martha again. I know we're trying to work within the scheduling and, like you say, the governor's phase 2, which is through June 26th. And what I understand, phase 3 is highly unlikely to happen. But, I talked about last time, for this to be a really good plan, we need public input. And I mean, I know you're doing all you know to do. We all are. But I think we need to talk about this some more amongst ourselves and come up with some more ideas. I'm afraid we're not going to get a whole lot of participation.
I agree, Martha. Ms. Catherine.
So I think the important thing, so we need to figure out a way then which what method do you think would get participation in the relatively near future? Because without beginning to move through this community engagement, more direct community engagement process, we either develop the plan, without it, which we don't want to do, or we do nothing essentially for an indefinite period of time. And so we're certainly open to any ideas that the committee has, and that's why I wanted to bring this back up to you. And I don't know if we want to reconvene at a time in the relatively near future to discuss this some more once you've had some more opportunities to think about it. But we'd be certainly open to. We can do a new meeting sometime. Just to,
yeah, but I would like to let us individually think about it and try to, see if we can come up with some other ideas too. And it'll probably be a combination of things we'll have to do to try to reach as many people as we can. But at least for me, I'd like to think about that and hopefully come up with some, not just questions for you, but some solutions at the next meeting that we can set up.
Okay.
Because it's certainly a pickle. I mean, it was a variety of things. It's not just COVID-19. There are a variety of things in the last 90 days that have changed the way we do our normal lives. So people, I'm not sure people have figured out their normal life yet.
Yep.
I think if this is Jane, I think if we have, maybe more short meetings and just talk about this, once we've had some time to think about it, I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Because I agree with Martha. I think there's, we need to think about it and come up with some thoughts, solutions, hopefully, and to help you.
And Vaughn, this is Matthew. I mean, we could always open this up and have a sort of a town hall meeting, if you will, via Zoom as an option. It could be one of the options. I'm not saying it's the only option.
Well, that was kind of our first, that was kind of our first thought. But what we wanted, what we've experienced so far with doing meetings with a large number of people is that if we expect people to be able to, or want people to engage with us, people tend to hide a little bit when they're in a crowd online, and that's why we focused on having something where we could bring small groups of people if we're going to do it online. And that's why we're still focusing on small groups, doing it in person. We can,
just as an option, I know Zoom will let me create breakout rooms. It's not something that I've done on my own yet.
Yeah.
We
Our
could
problem
do
with
that.
Our problem with that is that we wouldn't necessarily have the resources to be able to facilitate all those. And if something's happening online, in a room sequestered off somewhere, a chat room sequestered, we don't know necessarily what happens.
Yeah, certainly understand, absolutely understand, and that is difficult to administer and monitor.
Right. It was our hope.
Options.
Yeah, it was our hope to be, no matter the way that we had originally planned it, being as involved as possible in all the discussions taking place, to the extent that would have been feasible. We would have loved to have seen a room with 100 people in it with small tables, groups of 6 or 7 people sitting around them having these discussions and reporting back out to the committee of the whole. But so we're trying to come up with some solutions. I've done public hearings and public meetings. One I've done in Gatesville, Texas, and Little Rock, Arkansas, in the past few weeks, where we've done kind of town hall meetings on comprehensive plans and other things we're working on. And there's some engagement from some interested people, but it's generally not as people don't speak up as much necessarily in those settings. They don't have to.
What if we open it up over to a room at Guilford Tech? Something a whole lot larger, like an auditorium type setting.
Yeah, this goes back to that's possible, but I can if we're going to bring everybody together, if we're going to say leave your house and go be in a room with a lot of people, it would need to be very meaningful for a lot of for a segment of the population to want to do that. And if it's something that can be replicated by us doing a voiceover on a PowerPoint presentation or something like that, that's great. Because just being in an auditorium and seeing us on stage or something like that, I don't know if there's a greater benefit to that than doing it in a way where they could.
You can always feed them.
Sure.
So for instance, how many people are on our steering committee, Matt?
Katie, I believe there's 13, is that right?
That sounds right to me.
And I've heard 5 people top speak tonight. So it is a situation where when you get into this type of event, it's hard for people to express what they feel and what they think and how they.
And so we've done listening sessions for a couple of comprehensive plans online. We did it for Cleveland County, and we're doing a joint plan in Person County and City of Roxborough right now. What we would, we'd have maximum about 5 or 6 people online with us. And if you're not talking, excuse the siren there for a second. If you're not talking, you get called out essentially that, okay, Bob or Jim or Sally, it's your turn to answer the question now. And so when we do small group facilitated discussions like that, we can make sure that everyone's engaged, and we think it works out pretty well. Just throwing it out there. I think, having another meeting of the committee at some point soon to, for everybody to have a chance to think about it and give us some input, would be great.
Well, Vaughn, this is Martha. How you say have 5 or 6 people? Well, how do you pick those 5 or 6 people? Or it's just online and you hope you have 5 or 6 people to sign up? I mean,
yeah. So we would, work with the town to advertise it and put those meeting slots, make those meeting slots available and get them filled up. We would have to do the same thing if we were doing it in person as well. I don't think that I really have a big preference one way or if these were the 2 options. I think doing it in person would be a little bit better, just because you usually get a little bit better feel and kind of, read the room a little bit more when you're in the same room with somebody. But I don't know if there would be a large distinction between them in terms of the kind of turnout that we got. And if we need to do one, our scope of work was to basically, spend a few hours in the meeting for this first meeting. We're talking about, 20 hours maybe when it's all said and done in those meetings. So we're not, certainly not trying to get out of anything. We're making a lot more work for ourselves to try and accomplish the mission. But we want you to be comfortable with it. And so I think having some time to think about what might work best. And just so from my perspective and what we've heard from the committee when we interviewed is that, whatever engagement occurs needs to be meaningful for those who are being engaged. And so if we're asking people to come to a meeting or to come meet with us somewhere, they need to feel like they come away from that having contributed to the process and have basically a fulfilling experience that met their expectations. And so me standing in front of a room just talking to people for an hour or 2 probably wouldn't be that fulfilling for most people. So that's just something to keep in mind as we think about how best to move forward with this initial public engagement.
That sounds good. I think if we could maybe I'll just shoot out an email or get Katie to shoot us out an email in another week or so and just come up with a couple of ideas if we can and see if we can.
How's next Monday look, Matthew?
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
And I'll ask Katie to help me remember to get that email typed up and sent out. If you've got a specific question you want us to send out, I'd be glad to do that, Vaughn.
Yeah, we might put something together that kind of goes back through some of this just to, discussion points or things to keep in mind as we're thinking about ways to modify our planned plan. So that kind of answers the next question about our upcoming steering committee meeting. So I guess if everybody's available next Monday, maybe we can get back together to talk about the community engagement some more and discuss some of your ideas. And we'll have Matthew get something out to you to remind us all to do that. And if that's, is there anything else for the good of the committee? Kenny, Matthew, anything to add?
Do you have a recommendation on maybe an upcoming meeting for everybody to get together again? I guess electronically, at least for now.
I think he's saying that he wants to meet next Monday.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. See if we could do this again next Monday.
Gotcha. Okay, I apologize. I thought that Martha and I were both under the impression that you wanted us to get an email out and some responses by next Monday.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's do let's send an email out like maybe tomorrow and see if we can get back, together.
Get some ideas back together no later than Monday. Okay.
Yeah.
Matthew, I think the key may be that we will be very specific at the next meeting and have specific goals that we're going to try to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a specific time so that we don't drag the. I'm doing a ton of stuff now online with these various operations, and sometimes the students and the classes I'm teaching are now international. They have a tendency to just go on forever. So be specific, have time limitations in there. The Presbyterians will love it. And you stay within the guidelines and you go from there. That way we don't chase too many rabbits. We come up with issues, we discuss them vigorously, and we go on.
Sounds like a plan.
Vaughn, I'm going to be out of town all next week. So
okay.
You're saying to have the meeting next Monday. That's going to be, that's not going to give me enough time, I don't think, to get my thoughts together and get an email to you.
That's fine. Let's just.
So I'm looking at like even that, the week of July the 6th. I mean, if you're wanting to go ahead and set up a meeting now, a date with everybody, or you wanting to send an email out later with a date?
That's fine with us.
So which day?
Well, I'll get with Matthew and we'll get a date set.
Okay, sounds good to me.
If everybody's okay, we're just kind of looking at the July the 6th day. It's the first Monday of July. Just if there's anybody that has any big conflicts with that, let us know.
That's also a holiday weekend right before that. I don't know if that matters to anybody.
It'll give people plenty of time to come up with ideas.
All right.
All right, we'll let you know for sure, but Katie and I will work on getting the email out tomorrow.
Yep.
And then we'll look at going ahead and scheduling the meeting possibly for July the 6th.
Sounds great.
Well, let me say, if I could please, the information was eye-opening. You folks know what you're doing. It comes through. My idea and appreciation of Jamestown has really increased because of your research, and I thank you. And the community needs to know this stuff. This is great, great, great information.
Glad you enjoyed it. We'll keep on working at it.
Super job.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
If nobody has anything else, I'll go ahead and we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Y'all have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.